Are you unable to concentrate on the tasks at hand? Do you need help focusing more or leveling up your game? Here's a tip. Try Cognizin Citicoline, clinically studied to support mental energy, focus, memory, and attention. Cognizin supports brain health and supplies the brain with the energy it needs to stay sharp. Cognizin is a leading nootropic, featured in over 200 products. This podcast is powered by Cognizin. Visit cognizin.com to learn more and find a product to help you fuel your day.
Ready to achieve great heights? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to Power Your Performance, the podcast where we dive deep with leaders in the gaming world and beyond and learn the techniques they use to power their lives. I am your host, Gary Kleinman.
Power Your Performance welcomes Dr. Csakai.
Powered by Cognizin.
How are you, Corey?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I know we've had a couple scheduling snafus, so it's good to see you. As we can tell, Corey is a chiropractor and runs the Esports Healthcare Center. And obviously from the name of that, has a very specific expertise in esports, which we'll get to in a little bit. But we're going to go back a little to Corey as a young kid. When did gaming become meaningful?
So growing up, we didn't have our own systems in my home, but one of my aunts had the original Nintendo. One of my cousins had Super Nintendo. So anytime we would go to their places for barbecues or just family gatherings, we would have an opportunity to play some of the old games. So Super Mario and Super Mario 3. The second one wasn't quite as good. The original Mario Kart and like Mortal Kombat, some of those games. And those were always fun. And then in the later 90s, Nintendo 64 came out, and friends of ours had that. So we would play all those games, the Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart and GoldenEye, and that was our introduction to first-person shooters, like most people my age. And then in 2001, Xbox came out, and that kind of changed everything. So that was the first console that my family owned, and I remember it like it happened yesterday. It was Christmas 2001, and we got Xbox and Halo, and we were playing Halo's campaign for the first time ever. And for me, that was kind of that life-changing moment where it wasn't just like a video game and we got to play it occasionally for fun. It was a big deal now, and we played it a lot. And from there, then everything just kept getting more advanced.
But what made it more than just a video game, and captured? Because even looking at you, there's somewhat of an emotional connection to it. What was it about that game at that point in your life that you go, this has a grasp on me?
I think accumulation of everything that Halo brought with the next gen console. It had. I mean, we look back at it now and the graphics don't look quite as impressive. But in 2001, that was our most amazing graphics we'd ever seen. We went from N64, the polygon figure shapes, to then actual movement and 3D graphics. And I think Halo did a really good job with the visuals. They did a really good job with a story that kind of roped you in, but then also just like everything else about it, like the music, even the music. I was actually playing Halo campaign with my brother the other day. We wanted to just go back and go through each of the campaigns in order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ODST, Reach, and then Halo Infinite. So we just started playing again the other day, and we were doing the same stuff. We would go back and switch the graphics to the old, because they have the anniversary graphics now. So we switch it over to the old engine graphics, and with the old music and everything. And it's kind of what you talked about, that nostalgia feeling of like being back. I'm 11 years old. It's Christmas.
Yep.
Life is perfect kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
which is fascinating, because there are few things that do that, and for lots of people, gaming is one of those. So as you're waiting for Christmas and barbecues and what have you at your cousins and your aunts, are you harassing your parents and going, I don't want to wait for a barbecue, why can't we have it at home?
Yeah, we used to complain a lot. It never worked until finally, I guess my brother had convinced my parents that Xbox in 2001 was fair game, and they finally caved in. But prior to that, we never had anything. We had computers, so we had computer games. I remember playing like Wolfenstein 3D on my dad's old computer. So we had some stuff. It was just never quite what we needed or what we wanted.
And was that because your parents thought that gaming was a mindless kind of non-social, not positive conduct or activity?
I think the way you described it might have been maybe too aggressive. I think their attitude was more, we wanted you to be outside. It's summer, it's nice out, go outside and play. And it was, so I guess there's probably a health aspect to it for the physical activity, just being outside, fresh air, sunlight, movement, all that stuff. But yeah, I always joke with my mom, even now, it would be a situation in New Jersey, it would be raining, and I would make a joke like, oh, remember when we were younger and you would force us to go outside? She's like, I didn't force you. You wanted to go outside. I allowed you because you wanted to go play in the rain.
That's funny. I think as a parent, because my kids will be the first ones to tell you they did not grow up in what would be a gaming supportive environment. You know, I was always, your mom, go outside, shoot hoops, do whatever. You know, you're going to get bed sores sitting in the house. And now, because of all the college scholarships that are available, and obviously some of the money, I think there are some mothers and fathers sitting someplace going, why are you shooting hoops? You know, why are you not inside playing games?
Yeah.
You know,
I think when you're talking like from your experience as a parent at that point, and my experience growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, back then there wasn't really such thing as a career. Unless you were developing the game,
right?
There was not a career in video games.
No
where
question.
now it's you don't even have to be a developer or a gamer. There's 1,000 other opportunities for work, for having an opportunity to succeed in this industry. And even just like an example with what we're doing, we're kind of a niche market right now with esports health, right? I mean, that's not something that's huge, but it's another industry branch that's gonna eventually become a huge part of it.
Oh, no question. And we're going to get to that in a few minutes. But without a doubt, I mean, Jason Chung at the University of New Haven has an undergraduate degree in gaming. And, you know, it's all STEM based to a large extent. But he also, as part of the curriculum, has, you know, business and accounting, you know, and P&Ls and all the other things that would go into traditional school. And I believe they created a postgraduate degree as well. So, yes, to your point, the opportunities in gaming are tremendous, which is, you know, kind of is interesting from a mental health perspective, as opposed to, you know, in addition to physical, is that so many kids, and there are examples of young kids making $3 million, you know, at a tournament. Like I think 3 years ago, some 15-year-old kid, you know, won $3 million playing Fortnite. And the media picked up on that. I always thought the funny part of that story was not Saturday night when he won the $3 million, but Sunday night when the 14-year-old, 15-year-old sitting at the table and his mother says, you know, did you do your math homework? And he says, you know, no, I paid Dad to do it. I made $3 million this week. He didn't. You know, and how and from a kid's psychological perspective, how do you become a student, you know, in high school when you think I'm going to repeat that $3 million on a regular basis? I mean, what a change. I mean, do you see that in your practice? And I know we're jumping ahead and we're going to go back, but now that I brought it up, do you see that there's a conflict in certain kids that go, well, I don't want to do anything but game because I can?
I think a lot of the kids they would normally have that attitude, but from the people that I've met, their parents tend to keep them on track, where it's like, listen, we will allow you to play your video game, and because we know you're good at it, we've seen the results. However, if you don't do well in school, you don't play. Yeah. And it's a simple ultimatum. And I've seen that a lot. And I think that's a great parenting move. I mean, your kid's great at video games, that's fantastic, and that's a potential career for them. And in his case, winning $3 million is wonderful. But at the end of the day, you still, as a parent, you'd still want your kids to at least finish out high school before going after their dream in gaming. So I've seen that a few times. I think the parents seem to be more on track. And the kids
Mike, I can tell you, my kids know that somewhere in the world there's 2 or 3 buried Xboxes that I forgot where I put them because they weren't doing something right, and that was the easiest thing to take away. But let's go back. So you're playing with your kids. You finally get a system. Do you remember the first time you beat your brother?
Not specifically. I mean, we ran the campaign first because the story, once we started playing that story, kind of just hooked us in. And then we played a lot of split screen. We used to do, I think what a lot of kids did, we had a divider, like a big cardboard or big, like some sort of divider line. And we would play split screen with 2 of our friends. So it would be my brother, me, 2 friends, and we would split teams and change up and everything. But we would put this big divider like against the screen so you couldn't screen watch. So you couldn't cheat by looking at the next person. And I've seen some memes come up occasionally on social media where it's like where it started, and it's a picture like that with the divider line and everybody leaning in on an old tube TV, and then it shows where it is now, and it's like the big arena, and you're playing in front of 50,000 live fans. So we all started in that same position. I don't think I ever played. We didn't really play Halo's not really a 1v1 type game. It can be, but usually you try to team up. So I don't think I remember specifically necessarily beating him at any moment.
Do you remember being competitive with him in gaming? I mean, I guess what I'm really alluding to is how much of your history, brotherly gaming, is some of the connected tissue that you have with him now.
I think we actually were way more competitive in traditional sports against each other. So we would play wiffle ball, we'd play ping pong and basketball. And I think that was where we really took it out on each other and would start fights. And in the gaming, it was never quite as intense because I think probably the real reason for that was neither of us were that good. Okay. So we had friends of ours who were amazing, and 2 of them actually had played at the professional level at that point. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that 2002 to 2005's professional circuit was quite what it is now, but they were good enough to play on those levels then, which was light years ahead of where I was.
Still impressive.
So it was hard to be competitive and angry when I was getting destroyed by friends who were
by everybody.
Level. Yeah.
So obviously health and wellness became an important part of your life. When did that start?
Probably in high school. So it was originally, it started as an obsession with fitness. So I wanted to, you're watching some of these videos of somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger from the 70s and 80s, and you're seeing some of these other guys that compete in the bodybuilding circuits. And I think I got really attracted to that idea of having just looking a certain way, like the comic book superhero or the Greek god or the Mr. Olympia bodybuilder. So I started lifting a lot, and I ended up going to school specific to health and exercise science because I wanted to learn more about exercise and bodybuilding and physique and all that. And then probably a year or 2 into that, it heavily switched over to not just wanting to be exercise only, but expanding further, doing something more. So that was when I started looking into professional schooling for health and wellness. So I didn't want to do medicine. I'm not a huge fan of pharmaceuticals in general. When they're necessary, they're absolutely necessary. I don't want to get into that conversation.
Right. No, I get it.
I prefer the wellness without it the best you can. So I looked at chiropractic, physical therapy, occupational therapy, some of those other avenues. I ended up liking chiropractic the most. I feel like it just fit my kind of perspective on what I wanted to do. So then I went to chiropractic school, and learned everything I could. So I continued to focus on the physical. So I continued to work out, try to learn everything I could from anatomy to improve my workouts. And then we went to school with the acupuncture program and also the naturopath program.
Yeah.
So because of the naturopath program, I had known people in that program, and one of them is actually now on my esports team. But because of them, I started getting really involved with learning nutrition. So it was, I had a good handle on the physical health with exercise and now chiropractic. But then the naturopaths really started dragging in like, hey, listen, if you're not eating well, you're not actually healthy. And the one that Jess is on my team now, she's the one who brought attention some of these other factors of nutrition, and turns out she was right that nutrition is as important as she said. But 22 years old, 25 years old, I wasn't there yet. But now, because of her, I'm open-minded to everything. So we look at it as sleep is always our priority, and then physical health, physical activity in general, nutrition and mental health kind of encompass what we describe as the foundation of wellness. But it was originally just bodybuilding, and I wanted to have a physique. I was a 17, 18-year-old kid who was super vain and just wanted to look a certain way, look like the statues in Greece. And now here I am, a provider for video gamers.
And no, that's great. That's interesting. Just where the origin comes from, right? I mean, it's everyone's got a path to where they get to, and it's interesting because as you're bodybuilding, you're obviously paying attention to your physique. Were you paying as much attention then to nutrition? I guess to a certain extent you had to, because you couldn't be consuming a lot of sugar and fat and bodybuilding and have the physique that you want. Right. But was that from a formalized basis that you actually go, hey, I got to eat a very regimented diet, and I need to take supplements and vitamins? Nobody called them nootropics then, but I think that's just a new way to describe healthy supplements and vitamins, is called them nootropics. You know more than I in that respects. But as you're bodybuilding as a 17, 18-year-old, how much of nutrition and stretching and true muscle development were you focused on, or was it all from a visual perspective?
So I think I was fortunate to have met a few people who guided me in the right direction for the physical portion. So the workouts, I consider myself really lucky. I ended up speaking to a professional bodybuilder kind of really early in my lifting career, and asked for advice. I was like, I'm just starting out. What's your best advice for somebody who's just starting? So this guy, I'm so thankful I spoke to him, because he told me that when you go to the gym, there's the number one rule is that you're there to train your muscles, not your ego. So go in and don't worry about how much weight you're lifting. Worry about the form in which you're moving. It's like there's nothing more important than the way you move in the gym. You prevent injury, you maximize your gains. Don't sacrifice your form for more weight ever. So I took that to heart. So I've been super fortunate because I never had any injuries, because I followed that very strictly. And so I feel like the physical component I had a good handle on even from the beginning. And then I went to school. So every day I was learning something new to improve the routine. At the beginning, the diet was probably what you hear about from a lot of high school, young college kids. I was just eating a lot of lean meat, like chicken. I was eating a lot of protein in general, and just trying to eat, I'm not going to say the healthiest diet, but I was eating reasonably healthy foods that, I wasn't eating cheeseburgers every night kind of thing. It was lean chicken. I was eating a little, like, bread was part of it still. I was eating eggs and bread, but it was, like you said, kind of eliminating some of the really bad stuff. So I wasn't eating greasy food. I wasn't eating fried food. For a long time, I didn't drink soda or eat any fast food. So I was making probably good decisions for restricting certain long-term ailments that come from nutrition, but I definitely at the time was not optimizing nutrition for the benefit of both bodybuilding and health until my grad school years with the naturopath program, and specifically with Jess. She turned me around big time. She's like, you got to stop eating this crap and eat something better. And here's an alternative for this. Like you need to be smarter than what you're doing. Otherwise you're going to die early, kind of thing. So now my diet is probably as healthy as it ever has been. And I feel good. I feel like my body's in good shape. So
how much of that? Because what I hear is the bane of the body is inflammation, right? So that we should be all eating anti-inflammatory diet, so to speak, because that keeps you holistically well and what have you. So do you like maintain more of like a Mediterranean type diet as opposed to some other diet?
So I wouldn't consider mine Mediterranean. I don't eat a huge volume of fat. Part of the physique goal that I have is maintaining a certain body composition. So I eat, the fats that I eat are targeted. So I have a fish oil every morning. I eat 2 servings of a monounsaturated plant source. So for anybody listening, monounsaturated fat is one of 3 types of fat. It tends to be the most heart healthy. So that's the one we try to focus on. Saturated fat on the other end tends to be what you had just said it tends to be what we describe as quote pro-inflammatory. It's not necessarily the most accurate description, but the idea is that if you eat a ton of saturated fat, it tends to trend towards inflammatory conditions, heart conditions, and metabolic disorders. It's not always an absolute, but the trend tends to be that way. Where monounsaturated fat in things like peanuts, tree nuts, extra virgin olive oil, avocado, tends to be more of that heart healthy, anti-inflammatory fat. It's not exactly that, but it's the easier way to explain it simply. And so I have the fish oil, which is an omega-3 fatty acid. Then I have 2 servings of different nuts. So usually cashews and almonds, or almonds and pistachios, usually one of those 3 or 2 of those 3. And otherwise I try to limit saturated fat, and I try to eliminate as much as I can with processed foods. Obviously, I feel like in today's world, it's not always the easiest thing, especially at the volume.
Yes.
So, for example, right now I'm eating 3,700, 3,800 calories per day. So to get all of that in 100% natural, organic
would be tough.
Would cost me a ton of money, and it would be hard to do.
Yeah.
So some of the things I eat, I'll eat chicken in a wrap. So the wrap is processed, it's processed, but
minimally, but it's minimal.
It's not, I eat bread, which still counts as processed, but like you said, minimal. But yeah, the diet in general, it's higher carb because I have a really physical routine every day. I weight train 7 days a week. I do cardio 40 minutes a day, 7 days a week. And then I treat patients. I'm not the chiropractor who goes in and just adjusts and see you later. If I have a patient scheduled, it's either for 30 minutes or for 60 minutes, and I'm working them hands-on for the entire duration of 30 or 60 minutes. I don't use passive modalities. I don't do anything passive in general. Everything's working. So if I have 5 patients in a day, I have 5 hours of very physical, intense hands-on work, plus my workout, plus my cardio. So I have to eat a lot to keep up with that. And
yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. And because so much of it is short-term, high intensity, I have to eat a lot of carbs to kind of fuel that. So if I was less active, I would probably switch over, lower the carb a little bit, increase the fat a little bit, because I don't need that high intensity energy. But because of my lifestyle, I tend to eat a lot more carb than I think another person similar size would normally eat.
So you graduate from chiropractic school and so you have a doctorate in natural health as well?
So the doctorate is chiropractic. So it's DC, Doctor of Chiropractic.
Then as you graduate, did you start your own practice right away?
Actually, no. I worked for a different company for a year and a half. I actually, so Esports Healthcare was the LLC business that I registered in New Jersey. And I was actually working for this other company when I opened the LLC because I started to communicate with gamers. So I needed an entity to protect me professionally. So I didn't want to just use my name, and because you know how easy it is to get in trouble with that. So I created the business entity to kind of be an umbrella to protect me working with somebody else in the healthcare field. And then within 6 months after that, I was no longer working with that other company. So I started on my own and I started locally, and I ended up just using this brand because I already had it registered. So I was treating patients locally.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what was it that triggered, or how did working with gamers start? Because when you're going back to when I think you started that, gaming is certainly wasn't what it is today. And gamers, in terms of my experience in this health and wellness space of gamers, the younger gamers think they're invincible, right?
Yeah.
So if they have pain, they don't think it's pain. And if they need energy or they want energy, they'll reach for Monster or Red Bull or energy in lots of sources other than better sleep, better health, better nutrition.
Right.
So were they coming to you? And if so, what was the psychographic demographic, if you will, of the person that started coming to you in a gaming world to say, I need help?
So originally, the idea actually started when I was still in school. So I was in grad school. My last semester specifically in chiropractic school was just clinic. So we didn't have it. We weren't doing schoolwork anymore. We had boards to look forward to, but we didn't have any homework in terms of like written stuff. So we'd go to clinic and we treat people all day, and then I'd come home and I would just it was the year that Halo 5 was released. So I'd go home and I'd play Halo 5 with friends of mine. And during the weekdays, I'd play for an hour or two, and weekends I might play for 3, 5, more hours. And when I was playing, I would think like, man, my hands hurt. Like I'm only playing for an hour tonight or 2 hours tomorrow. My hands are hurting, and sitting in the chair, my back is aching, my neck is stiff. And then I would go to clinic the next day and tell my fellow students, my back feels stiff. I was sitting last night playing video games. Get adjusted and I'd feel wonderful. So, and then same thing, kind of like talking to individual, either professors or other students, like my hands have been aching, like, doing these stretches. Do you have any other ideas? So kind of picking up from other people's just objective idea. And I thought, well, I do this for 2 hours, 3 hours a night, and my hands hurt, my back hurts. I watch these live streams, and these guys do this for a living.
Yes.
So they're out there playing 5, 6, 7 hours per day. And if my hands hurt an hour and my back hurts in an hour, and then I go to the clinic and I could resolve it immediately, they're playing for 6 hours a day. What are they doing for it? And like, who's going to be the one to fix that? So I was like, maybe I'm going to be the one to fix that. So that was when the idea started. And I actually started writing a business plan in clinic when, if a patient canceled and I had a half hour, I would work on it. Instead of playing Halo for 5 hours a night, I would play Halo for an hour or two and then work on this plan. So I started that, and then recognized that a lot of the gamers, their social media is heavier on Twitter. So I joined Twitter, and I tried to look around and reaching out to any gamer that had contact information on their profile. So I started reaching out like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. If you ever need any help, let me know. And started getting, some of them would follow me back, and started getting a little bit of a following. And then a few of the pro level gamers did reach back and like, hey, listen, I don't think anything is a big problem for me yet, but this is what I do for a living. I need to make sure I can continue to do this for a living. So early on, a lot of it wasn't bringing in injury. It was just pros coming through saying, I want to continue to play. I don't want to lose this. A teammate of mine had to retire because his hand is busted. So we started just simple stuff, started working on movement patterns, created a warm up, and that actually is our best video on YouTube now. Created a stretch program, and then started giving these things out and doing some video calls. A couple of them, we actually connected with Jess. I mentioned my naturopathic doctor. She does nutrition for us. So she actually worked with a few of them and gave them a full nutrition plan. And so they started working with Jess. They worked with me with hands and stretching and some stuff for their neck and back. So that was just kind of the foundation of it. And then friends of mine were similar in the clinic. They were with me at school, but then also were gamers. So I was like, hey, listen, this is getting a little bit busier. I need some help. Like, is this something you'd be interested in helping me with? So now I have a whole team, and it's for a little bit. We actually just in the past year or two have been a little bit dormant. Got busy with personal stuff. So for example, I moved out to Las Vegas. I'm West Coast now. Jordan, my other provider, opened his new practice, and Jess is same thing. She's got different things going on with work, and she works for this enormous international company that does nutrition. So we're all trying to get back to it now, but the foundation was an idea in school, and then reaching out on Twitter, and then helping a few pros, and then it just kind of blew up, and we made this whole website, and
that's great.
Just trying to help everybody we can.
How much of that, and for all the gamers that are watching, and I think health and wellness certainly in the last couple of years has become prominent in gaming. I wouldn't say prominent. I think it certainly has a place in a conversation that's starting, and I think people are paying attention to it. But all the chairs are not really, for the most part, ergonomically designed to be supportive. They look great, but they're not something you want to sit in for 8 hours. The mouse and the keypads and what have you are not tremendously well designed for health, right? I mean, so is part of the problem you're treating not the cause, but you're treating the result of a bad chair for 8 hours. I mean, you're going to be sore anyway, but should some more attention be spent by manufacturers on the accessories and the equipment to promote better health?
I think yes, but it seems like there's a little bit of a trend for that already. I think maybe there needs to be a little bit more focus on that. And I don't know if these organizations that are selling the chairs or the keyboards or the mouse and the whole setup, I hope that they're working with professionals in the space. So for example, if you're building a chair and you want ergonomics, I hope you're consulting a chiropractor and a physical therapist, because they're the ones who do that. Like chiropractors, we're not actually spine doctors, but that's what everybody calls us. So you would hope that they would consult a chiropractor for the ergonomics of spinal position, a physical therapist for the ergonomics of the muscle tension and the movement balance and all those. I hope they're doing that. I don't know if they are.
I can tell. I can tell you from conversation that for the bulk of they are not. That it's design based, color based, hip and cool based. But they'll say it's a chair. Other than someone like Herman Miller, that everyone says Herman Miller's gaming chair, very expensive, but is ergonomically designed for prolonged gaming. I don't believe, for the most part, the hard accessories, the mouse, the keypads, they certainly don't seem to be designed for that, any more so than your standard keyboard and mouse is for consumer using, cell phones. I mean,
right.
The taking a selfie is not the best position, you'll know better than I, for your wrist, and I think there is actually a term or a condition called selfie wrist for those people that have inflammation and what have you from taking too many selfies. So no, I don't think that, interestingly enough, with the number of chairs and phones and keypads and everything else that are out there, that there is much attention being spent on the design functionality as opposed to, and I think, Apple became incredibly successful because they took a staid, boring computer and put some art to it. right?
Yeah,
And
that's
made
true.
right, and people say, "Oh God, that's cool." They didn't change the functionality in terms of ergonomics and what have you, and especially a laptop.
Yeah.
It's probably where I get more of my soft tissue pain is from that. So, do you help counsel gamers and your non-gamers of proper alignment in the chair? Because I even, as I sit in this chair, there's a tendency to lean forward and to slump and to
Yeah.
hunch over. Is that part? I'm sure it's part of the entire modality that you deal with your patients.
Yeah, it's actually, if it's funny, normally if this were my whole team and there was a question specific to posture, I immediately defer over to Jordan. So Jordan is one of our other chiropractors, and his shtick, we used to make fun of him that the only thing he did was posture, which wasn't fair, because he obviously, as a chiropractor, he does it all. But his foundation, he was really heavy on posture and ergonomics and balancing your body position. So we actually we have a page on our website specific to posture. So if you ever if Google search gaming posture or gamer posture, we should still be the first link that you find. But it's the whole foundation of that actually starts with the fact that humans are not really designed to sit in chairs. So if you ever look at a toddler running around and then they want to rest, they don't find a chair, they squat on their heels. And if you ever went to a country that's underdeveloped in comparison to the United States, same situation. They're not walking around sitting on rocks or stumps, they squat on their heels. And that's actually the natural position for rest for humans. It's also the natural position for having a bowel movement for humans. And in either case, we changed that and created the chair design for our resting position, which it's not great. It's not optimal. There's no such thing as perfect seated posture, because if you're sitting in a chair, you're already against what is natural, according to the nature of the shapes of your bones and the orientation of your muscles. So sitting in general, no matter what kind of chair you make, is never going to be good. I don't care if it's 1 hour, 8 hours.
So should we be gaming on a toilet? It's
the position is actually squatting. So an optimal resting position would be, like, for example, feet on the floor, and then you're sitting on your heels and your knees are flared up and you're kind of like just hunched over your knees. Okay. Yeah. So most people consider that uncomfortable because they've sat in chairs so long that some of their muscles and some of their joints don't have the mobility that they should, primarily at the ankle. That's usually where it happens first. So if you don't have ankle mobility, you can't squat on your heels. So if you can't squat on your heels, you can't rest naturally. So you'll be sitting in a chair and it's not good for you.
No, and I know on a podcast session we had with someone that actually was the chief ergonomist at AOL, what she kept saying, it's all about gravity, right? Is your gravity needs to be in its natural whatever alignment and what have you, and most of what we do all day is contrary to natural gravity. But with the gamers, what do you see as the most predominant complaint and/or injury that gamers present with?
So when we treat at events, most people come up and will say, like, what's going on? So we try not to lead it like, hey, what hurts? Because that's not the right question. So they come to us and it's like, all right, cool, you're here. What do you need? What are you looking for? What's going on? Majority of people at events tell us that they want that their neck feels tense or their back feels tense, because they're you know how it is, the gamer,
you're hunching, yeah,
the gamer posture. So especially in an event, it's really intense. So they're leaning forward and they're really into it. Generally speaking, not specific to events, we actually get more often mostly connective tissue pain. So a lot of stuff with hand discomfort, wrist discomfort. Most of it actually occurs in the forearms, because all the muscles that move your wrist and your hands are the bellies of the muscles are up here, and the tendons insert onto either side of your elbow. So we see a ton of elbow ailments. They're not actually the elbow. It's technically the forearm, but it feels like it's right at the elbow. So most of those are connective tissue ailments, tendinopathies, chronic overuse strains. Some of them are acute strains, which is less common, but it does happen. But it seems like a lot of the issues in the hand and wrist and into the forearm are specific to muscle, tendon, fascia, connective tissue in general. So in order, I would say tendinopathy and connective tissue disorder in the hand, in the upper extremity from fingers to elbow, sometimes in the shoulder, especially for gamers who use the mouse because they swing their arm around to get, we call it mouse shoulder. It's actually a tendinopathy of the biceps tendon, interestingly enough. And that happens from swinging the mouse and reaching back and forth and everything. So I would say tendinopathies, connective tissue disorders, overuse type ailments in the upper extremity, and then postural pain syndromes. So like neck pain in general. So we describe just non-specific neck pain, non-specific low back pain, but then more specifically things like the upper cross syndrome, where you get the rounded shoulders and the forward neck. And so those are postural ailments, and that's specifically due to the prolonged sitting. So the overuse in the hands and then the prolonged sitting, the combination of the two are by far the leading. Occasionally we get some other things, but those are the big ones.
And to prevent that, for those that want to prevent that, is stretching helpful to prevent that in terms of pre-gaming? I mean, what is the routine that you suggest pre-game to reduce the propensity of pain and discomfort post-gaming?
So in terms of habits and practices, you always want to get a good warm-up. So prior to any physical activity, the warm-up generally there's a few parts to it. The general warm-up is one where if you're exercising, you walk on the treadmill for 5 to 10 minutes just to get your heart rate up. In gaming, I'm not going to expect anybody to do that, to run around their house for 5 minutes. But normally in a routine, you'd get a 5-minute generalized full body warm-up to increase your heart rate, increase your respiratory rate, and increase core temperature. But in gaming, is that going to happen? Probably not. So then you dive into more target-specific warm-up movements. So if it was exercise and you were doing legs, for example, maybe you do walking lunges, or you do those walk back and forth where you're doing a high knee and then like a butt kick and then like a side shuffle. In gaming, we actually have a full routine for the hands and fingers. So we do things like opening and closing individual fingers, and then doing it with the finger pads, open and closing outward like this, wrist rolls, a lot of, the whole video is on YouTube if you ever want to check it out. But just to get everything loose and moving. Generally speaking, we recommend against static stretching prior to the exercise. There's a lot of research that shows sustained static stretching, where you're holding a position and pulling and feeling the tension, that a full routine of that could actually reduce your performance. I've seen research claim 5 to 10%. I've seen one paper say 20 to 25%. I'm not sure. That was one, so I don't know how much value is to that. But the general idea tends to be that a prolonged static stretching routine can decrease your performance prior to your performance. So we usually recommend dynamic warm-up movements first to get the blood flow, increase the oxygen uptake for the tissue in question. And then while you're playing, you want to take breaks and move around. So it's the repetitive nature of everything that becomes the big problem during the session. So for example, on a mouse, a lot of times when you're clicking, you're actually clicking downward, but the resistance is when you lift your finger off. So there's no resistance going down because it's gravity, right? Your finger is heavy enough to just hit the ground, and the button's not so heavy that you have to jam it and like really crunch it. So the resistance is actually, most people's mouse sets their wrist up backwards. Yes. We call this extension. Then you're lifting your fingers off the mouse, which is furthering that extension. And what ends up happening is you get a tendinopathy up near the elbow. We call it mouse elbow now. And it's because you're shortening that tendon so consistently over such a long period of time. Every time you open your hand, it gets shorter, but then you never do anything where it gets fully lengthened. So what we end up recommending for people who play at high volume for something like that specifically would be to get something weighted, like a full water bottle or a dumbbell, and do the extension part against resistance, and only do the resistance in that lengthening phase. So during the gaming, you're shortening the tendon by opening your hand. So after you're done, you want to lengthen that same tendon by going the opposite way. So it's a counterbalance of the tension. So those injuries used to be called overuse strains. I don't like that term. It's not that you're using it too much, it's that you're using it too much incorrectly. So I prefer to call it an imbalance. So it's an imbalance ailment, not an overuse ailment. Because it's not that you did too much, it's that you did too much this way and you didn't balance it this way.
That makes sense. And the video is the best place for people to find them. Is it under Esports Healthcare on YouTube? Is that the best way to locate them?
So we have a warm-up and a stretch routine on YouTube, which is just, it's the same. It's this brand, Esports Healthcare. The website has all the same info written down with the videos embedded, and that's esportshealthcare.com.
Great.
Yeah.
So before we go, last question is, what is your recommendation for gamers to game better and be healthy simultaneously?
So whenever that question comes up, I will always defer immediately to the number one most important thing for any health and performance metric across the board. I don't care what it is sleep. Absolutely number one. There's no argument on that. I would invite anybody to try to tell me otherwise. There's nothing more important in your life for both health and any type of performance than proper sleep. So it's that, and it's not just sleeping. You want to try to get the 8 hours. That's not a made up number. There's a lot of research behind that 7 to 8 hours, 7 to 9 hours tends to be optimal for adult humans. And then you want to try to go to sleep at the same time every night and try to wake up at the same time every morning. That part, I think, for gamers tends to be a huge challenge because tonight they went to sleep at 10 and then tomorrow there's a tournament and they're up until 2. And so, you know how it is. So that's one that gamers really need to try to prioritize. So sleep, same times every night, same time every morning, 8 hours, that's the goal. Second to that is I combine all three of them collectively because I don't think the others can rank ahead of each other. They're all kind of equally important, but it's physical activity, nutrition, and mental health. So physical activity doesn't have to be weight training, doesn't have to be running marathons. It just has to be physical activity. You just have to move. Our general recommendation is you want to physically move your body, increase your heart rate, increase your respiratory rate so you're breathing more, and do that for anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes every day is a good start. So obviously we can make more specific recommendations, but for the average gamer, if I try to give them 60 minutes a day, then there's no shot. So if we can do 20 to 30 minutes a day, just move around, get your body physically moving, feel your heart rate increase, feel your respiratory rate increase, you're breathing heavier. It's a good start. Nutrition is a big challenge to make generalized statements because everybody's a little bit different, but I would recommend learning some basics. We have some web pages on basic nutrition. If you don't know how to do it, speak to somebody who is more educated on the topic. We have people educated in nutrition that would be happy to help. But again, I guess the broad scope recommendation is food that's minimally processed, if possible, as close to nature as possible is usually the phrase we use. So trying to eat real food versus your breakfast cereal that's made of sugar and more sugar
and more sugar
and more sugar. So eating even a slice of whole grain bread is better than a breakfast cereal. I'm not going to say that either is fantastic, but you kind of get the idea.
Right.
Less processing. And then lastly, mental health is so important. So physical activity, nutrition, and sleep already will help with your mental health. So all three of those things, optimizing those automatically improves your mental. However, I think it's really important to prioritize mental health like we do physical health. So every year, hopefully most people will go to their doctor for a physical. Every year, most people will go to their dentist to get their teeth checked. And the same thing, like even with other things, if you own a car, you probably bring your car in for maintenance. But then you don't do the same thing for your mind. And I don't understand the disconnect. So your mind is another portion of your health. So you should prioritize that and do checkup screenings. So at least once per year, even I would think once a month or once every 2 months, go to see a counselor, a therapist. Even if you feel like you're not stressed or depressed, go and talk about it and find out what's wrong, because you don't necessarily know.
Right.
So that I always recommend for everybody to find somebody, a professional to speak to, because you can learn something. If nothing else, the mental health that we describe is find your journey. Some people like to meditate. Some people like to walk outside. Some people like to exercise. Whatever it is that helps you kind of focus in, dial down, manage the stress, and live more comfortably, do that. As long as it's not harmful to you or anybody else, go for it.
That's great. Corey, thank you. That's great advice. Love the history. Love the conversation. Esports Healthcare. And we'll do it again in a few months and circle back and provide more direction and support for gamers.
Love it. I'm happy to come back anytime you want to talk health, wellness, exercise, all of it.
Good to see you, my friend. Stay well.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Now I'm going to take a nap.
Perfect. There you go.
I think now everyone should go take an hour's sleep to get some of that sleep in.
Awesome.
Stay well. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for listening. This podcast is part of the MAP Esports Podcast Network and produced by Innovation Media Enterprises. Please be sure to leave us a review and follow us on your favorite podcast player.